All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this live session with the wonderful Céline Fivez to discuss budgeting and financing for new entrepreneurs, whether you're a solopreneur, running a small business, or thinking of running a small business, or you're a coach. Welcome all, and Céline will be sharing her insights. Welcome.
Thanks, and hi.
So just to give you a bit of a background, Céline has started her first business 5 years ago, and she's coming from the marketing background. And right now she's helping female entrepreneurs to start their own business, to quit the corporate world, and get going. So if there's anyone in my network who's flirting with the idea, I highly recommend reaching out to Céline. So Céline, was there anything else that you would like to mention about your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I love how we say that I started my first business 5 years ago because there's been a few different businesses in between. And I don't know, I always like to mention that because there's so much learning in it, and it also indicates that some of us just have that spirit to be entrepreneurial, but sometimes we don't land on the right idea right away. So, yeah, that's
Awesome. So one thing just to mention, I'm noticing some background noise. I don't know if you have headphones you could use for the session. I think it's on your side. We'll see. Let me try this way. Right. So for anyone joining us live, please feel free to ask away your questions or share anything you would like to know in the comments, and we will be answering them live as well. And Celine's got really wonderful tips and ideas and insights to share with you right away as well. And also just to mention that she's been a wonderful participant of the Abundant Coach Accelerator, the business program for coaches that I run as well. So it's been a wonderful collaboration. And all right, let's get started. So the reason I wanted to delve into this topic a little bit more is because obviously whenever, cash flow, what do they say? Cash is the king when you're starting.
Yeah.
And while it's really present when you're starting maybe like a larger scale company, it is kind of the same when you're starting out on your own. So even if you don't have a huge expense, huge staff to hire, lots of people to hire, lots of things to invest into, you still need to be mindful about how you plan your finances ahead. And to be fair, in the first year, I was quite haphazard. Like I just knew I had some money that will last me, savings to last me a year or so, but I wasn't very kind of precise with the spendings and calculating it. That's why personally, I was interested to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I love how you touch on that it's different for big businesses. Because I would actually argue it's a bit worse with a small business because it's so much harder to keep your personal finances separate from your business finances, whereas when you start maybe a product business or a larger scale business, the mindset that you start with would automatically be, oh, we need to look for funding. And so, yeah, I do believe that it should be the same mindset when you start even a small service business, because the beginning, I mean, it's hard. The income is so uncertain in the first like 1, maybe 2 years. So then on top of that, have to spend your own money on developing your business can weigh very heavily. So,
yeah, absolutely. That's something I found quite shocking when I started out. I thought, oh, that's like, changing a job. So you find your next thing to do, your next project. You spend 6 months getting, a bit shaky, and then you're settled. But in reality, when you run your own business, you're never 100% settled, right? So you need to be a lot more careful about planning ahead, especially early on. So what would you say, like, what was your process when you were deciding to quit, or how did you plan out your finances at the start?
I did a bit of what you did, where I had some money saved up and I was like, yeah, I'll be fine. I'll just keep living off of what I'm using now. And then after a while, I started realizing, well, this isn't going to last forever. And then that's when I started actually budgeting. And so the way I did that is I just started looking at what I was spending, just to get an idea of like, where's my money going? Because it's out the door very quickly. Yeah, and I did that for a couple months, and then I got an idea of what I was spending, and then I looked at that, and that was a bit difficult because you have to kind of take the red pen and be like, well, no, I don't really need that every month, you know. And I cut it down to just bare bones, just what I needed, like rent, bills, food. I had maybe like $50 a month to have some fun, but that's, you know, nowadays it's not a lot of fun. So yeah, and then that
So
gave me a bit of
what kind of things went off your list first?
oh gosh, I used to save every month for like unexpected car bills, and that went out the door because I was like, well, if I'm really gonna do this, I'm really gonna do this. Something else that I scratched was I also saved for things like hobbies and buying clothes. I didn't buy clothes for a very long time, so that went out the door. Yeah, a lot of those things that we think we can't do without, but we really can.
I remember when I decided that I was going to at some point quit my job and start a business, I started saving like crazy. I was like, okay, I want to put aside at least, you know, 1,000 and a half every month for a year to create additional cushion. And I remember I just had to make decisions like when my colleagues were going out for drinks, sometimes I just have to skip and just, you know, go home earlier or just like skip the whole thing.
Yeah.
I remember, so I also, you know, I was living in a nice area, but I kind of put up with sharing with 3 other people. We had quite a big house, but there were 3 other people in there. So I felt like I was living in a bit of like a student accommodation. And I was 30 at the time. So it felt, but it felt fulfilling, you know, like living simply felt like, okay, I'm doing this for a reason. And
yeah, I love that because that's something that I experienced as well. As you know your why, like you're not just randomly doing it, and you know where you're going, and that's so exciting. And also along the way, like you said, having to say no to drinks. I don't know if it was the same for you, but that bred so much more discipline for me, like having to say no. And then I looked at what I had to do in a day and I was like, well, I can't procrastinate today, and it's just switched.
It
So
made me appreciate things so much more. Because on
definitely.
the money that I felt like I can spend on going out with my friends, you know, it felt like I really appreciated the experience because I didn't just like, you know, do these things, didn't throw money at it like 2-3 times a week.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really smart that you started saving up like a year before, because then that kind of gives you an overall budget, and then you can start seeing, okay, what do I spend and how do I divide that into 12 months, 6 months. So great.
Yeah, I always say, like, you know, when you're starting your own business, aim to live poor until you can live posh in a posh way, you know. Again,
exactly the way to do it.
Cool. And so could you share like your sort of like top ideas for how to even start thinking about creating your budgets?
So there's a couple of different ways to do it. I did it the old school way in Excel, but it takes a lot more admin. What you can do is use one of the budgeting apps. So there's like Buddy, Goho in Canada. I don't know if that's international, and then Good Budget. And you can kind of just track your expenses. Some of them you can connect to your bank account, so it's automatic. You don't even have to input it in case you forget something. Of course, nothing in life is free, so there might be a little cost associated to those. But yeah, I mean, I would say that that's a great start to kind of start seeing where your money goes. It might be a bit shocking in the beginning. And then you can do that for, I always say 2 to 3 months, because I feel like that gives you a good overview. And then from there on out, like I said before, you take the red pen to it and you kind of have a look. And also, I think you also have to look at what's actually in my savings account, and how much of that am I willing to spend or willing to use. And that also gives you an idea. If it's like $50,000 a year, you could take that into account as well when you're building that monthly budget. So I would say that that's a great start.
Yeah. I also found, you know, just like you said, just looking at finances once a month, it was so powerful. Because there's some things that just got brought up, like, I really don't need that stuff, you know, to be happy right now.
Yeah, and often finances are something that we don't really look at enough. I don't think I used to even look at them once a month. It was there and it was okay. But now I'm very on top of it, and I always know how much is in it. Even when I go to the supermarket and I don't eat like a student anymore, but my bill wouldn't reflect that. Like it might be $60 a week still. Um, and yeah, I'll know exactly. Oh, there's this much left for like the rest of these weeks. And then you also kind of become a bit of a queen of your own finances, because then you can say, okay, so this week I had $80 for groceries and I only spent 60, so I've got $20 extra. Where do I want to add that on so I can have a bit more there? So
Yeah. And also, you can get very confused in the whole like budgeting idea, like how to build up your buckets, like how to allocate funds to it, how to keep track of that. Do you have any suggestions for that?
yeah, something that I've found really helpful with the budgeting is to not do the bank account side of it manually, because that's when you can sabotage yourself a little bit and say, okay, I'm going to take a little bit more. So what happens for me is, from my business every month, it automatically is transferred into my personal account, and it automatically goes into all these different accounts. So I like to work with like the envelope system. So I don't look at my savings as one big chunk, and then as soon as I have to take something, I'm like, oh no. So it's all in designated accounts. And I find that really helpful, because it also changes the way you look at your own money. Because if you have an account that says startup fund, then you know what you're using it for, and it won't feel quite as painful as just taking it from your savings and seeing that go down. So I
And
would say
did you
automate.
say it's in one bank or a few different banks that where you spread it?
For me, it's in one bank, but it's just different accounts.
Okay. Yeah. So these days you have the especially like so Céline is actually based in Canada. I haven't mentioned that at the beginning. So I know we'll have a lot of viewers from Europe as well and the US. So there's lots of newer banks that are out there now. Like I use N26, for example. They're quite good at tracking your spendings and guessing which bucket it should be in. So
Oh,
all you
yeah.
have to do
Yeah.
at the end of the month is just to say, this is right, this is wrong.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, or you can change the buckets. And there are some other banks, I think like Revolut and some of those, that they allow you to have those different accounts
Yeah.
for different things you want to create. And
Oh,
which particular themes or like buckets would you use? Like, because it can get like too much if you have like too many. Like, how do you think
yeah.
about the general split?
So I have one that I call my hub account, where like my business income goes into, and then from there it's spread out. So that would hold all my fixed costs, like rent, any bills I have to pay, stuff like that. Then I have one account that's my spending money, and there I would keep like money for groceries, money for gas, a little bit extra to go have some fun. Um, yeah, and then other than that, it's mostly savings. So that's something I want to mention. Like when you start building a budget, it doesn't just have to be for a short term. You can keep using that structure. So the way I do it is, when I feel like times are going to be a bit slimmer, I go on a lower budget, like just a less money. The word's eluding me now, but the only thing that changes if business is better is that I just save more. So then I go to the next tier in my budget. I have a couple set up that I know and that I can jump between. So yeah, predominantly. And the savings, a good thing to do is to kind of look at your goals, like short term, midterm, long term, and then determine, what's possible. How much can I put away each month? So yeah.
Yeah. And how did it support your journey? What did you notice as you were progressing with your work? I mean, I know it also can be quite confusing to budget when you're starting a business, because you don't have the predictability, how the next quarter is going to turn out. So
Yeah.
how did it support you, and how did you manage this uncertainty, not knowing for how long you're budgeting it?
Yeah. Well, for me, it was just really helpful to know this is like the end deadline. This is when, the money pit is going to run dry, and I'll have to find a solution. So that actually the most important thing it did for me is it took away a lot of stress, because I knew how long I had, and I knew that I had to make the most of that time that I did have. So that took away a lot of stress, I would say, mostly.
Gives you the kind of a deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And also, like, something that I notice a lot of coaches early in the journey, or early entrepreneurs, they have this vision of either they're doing this full time or nothing. It's either all or nothing mentality, where either you are full on in your business or you are full on in a corporate job. But in reality, I found, for example, in the first year of my coaching work, I was really struggling to figure out how to make this work. So halfway through, I was offered a part-time job to do something I knew how to do very well. And I said yes, even though it felt like, oh no, I'm stepping back into this corporate profession. This is like, I don't really, this was not my ideal. But at the end of the day, when I felt like, okay, this is actually something that is supporting my process, and so that I don't freak out on a monthly basis, that's something. And so far as I had a goal of, I just made a plan that, okay, I'm doing this to help me build the foundations of my business without being too nervous about it. And then my plan was to quit in 6 months afterwards, which happened, thankfully, because I've started getting more business training at the time. But yeah, it can feel uncomfortable. But I think with the budgeting and planning, you can also think through, okay, so if this runs out, what's my plan B, and how will I go about it? Like, how long will I need to find a project like that, and for how long will I keep it? So I think thinking about these things and understanding there is lots more, flexibility that's possible there, can also be very supportive to people's journeys, that they don't feel like it's either you've succeeded in the first year or you failed. You can actually have a bit of a mixed process.
Yeah. And that's a great mindset, because so many businesses do fail in the first year. And I strongly believe that most of them fail because they didn't have the financial means, or that just couldn't afford to spend more time on it. So to have that flexible mindset would be a great help. Definitely.
Yeah. I know we wanted to cover another really exciting topic that you're so good at, getting funding for your business from the government. That could really help you bridge that gap from the corporate to doing it on your own, because it can take some time to actually see stable revenue. So I'd love to cover that. But was there anything about budgeting and planning, anything else you wanted to mention before we move on?
No, I think on that end we've been...
Okay, let's get to it. So anyone else here thinking, okay, how else can I fund my work while I'm still figuring out how to get clients, how to, creating a product or a service that you have to offer? One thing, I haven't actually done this myself, but I've seen a couple of fellow coaches apply for government funding. It was especially plush, like during, the whole pandemic timing. The government was actually offering lots of different grants for new entrepreneurs. And I knew a few coaches who've secured it, and it offered them, I think it was like £1,000. So it's like just over €1,000, and in US dollars, that's 1,200-300 a month, to, just give them a bit of peace of mind that at least like the rent is covered, or, the groceries are covered. So so you are based in Canada, and that's exactly the process you've gone through as well. So the process might be different for other countries, but could you share a little bit like the overall concepts and ideas that could apply to anywhere?
I was just gonna say, like, it's really hard out here to find grants that would cover living expenses. But yeah, so there's a couple of different ways to do it. You mentioned government grants, but there's also private grants. So, for example, a way to look for those could be through organizations like we have here in BC, like it's called Small Business BC, that works with entrepreneurs of small businesses, or entrepreneurs groups for women that is more like a networking group. Those are good sources to look for any grants that are available. And then I would also actually Google grant databases, because a lot of companies just do that, and they just keep a database of all the grants, and you can work with them, or you can just look for them on your own. And then government grant wise, government database. I know that there's a lot of grants out there for female owned or founded businesses. So that could be a great source. Yeah, and a lot of them, again, here they don't really cover living expenses, but they're a great way to alleviate any business costs you have in the beginning when you're already kind of stressing out and thinking, well, I have, how long am I going to be able to live off my money? And then on top of that, you have to pay for a website and a scheduler and a Zoom license and all those things. So they're a great way to alleviate some of the financial stress.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I know in the UK, from just overhearing it from someone I know, they just give you a certain amount a month, and then you meet with them. I think it was quarterly, something like that, just to show them the invoices, the expenses,
Yeah.
and how things are progressing. And they just need to have confidence that you're not just having a party
Yeah,
and gone
yeah.
off on a
Yeah.
retreat somewhere in India. You're actually building a business. But beyond that, they don't actually. You don't have to only spend it on those expenses, just to support you overall.
Yeah.
But I mean, to me, when I heard you mention it, I thought, oh goodness, that must be so much work and so unpredictable. Actually gonna get a grant, I just wouldn't even start exploring,
Yeah.
to be honest. What inspired you to get going, and how was the process for you?
Well, I have gotten a government grant. I still keep applying for grants on the regular because you never know. But the one I
Especially
started with,
once you know how to do it, right, and that you know that you can get it. Why not?
it's a bit like writing a paper at uni. You have to just understand the game. So once you do, it's copy paste. But the first one I started with was one that the Canadian government came up with during COVID, which was to support businesses to go from a storefront to online. And even though I never had a storefront, I was still eligible. And it was a pretty quick application. It was just a couple questions and your information. And then something that some grants will do is, aside from offering you the money, they will also offer you a mentor, so someone to help you out. And that helped me set up my website, my scheduling page, and all those things. So that was great. There's also a few, and I love that you kind of said, if it's too much work, I wouldn't bother, because I think something that is a major pitfall when you start looking for a grant is you find these big grants, for like tens of thousands of dollars, but then you have to fill out 40 pages of questions to get it.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's definitely not worth it. There's
You may as
also
well spend
grants.
some time looking for clients, to get that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like looking for a grant can be a bit demotivating because it's a real funnel. Like in the beginning, you only find those major grants, and it's only by getting a bit more, like finessing your search, like going through things like Small Business BC or the Forum, which is like a female networking organization. Once you start realizing you can do that, you find way more specific grants that you won't have to fill 40 pages of application to get. So
Okay, so that's a good idea to think about, like what makes you different from any other applicant, possibly, and see if any grants are available for someone starting the kind of business or the kind of background you're coming from.
yeah, exactly.
And then what do you just Google it? Like, where do you actually find this databases?
Yeah. So I mean, the government grants are on the government website, so that's pretty easy. Yeah, I would start Googling. You could Google something like female founded businesses, grants, something like that. Or you could just Google grant databases. That's one way to do it. And I would also just Google organizations that work with entrepreneurs, because they will often have a little tab on their website as well that has a specific set of grants. Yeah.
Yeah, and could you give us an idea of, by the way, if anyone has any questions that's coming up that you'd like Céline to answer, just feel free to put into a comment box, and we'll address it here. But yeah, if you could give us an idea, maybe what's the amount of time, say, it takes to get one of those grants versus the actual funds flowing in your direction. Like, what's the
So it depends, because a lot of them you might not actually get the funds in your business account. Like the one I was on, I had to spend the money first over, I think I got like 4 or 5 months to get it all sorted, up to $2,400. So that was a bit scary. And then they say we'll look over like your receipts and your invoices and your credit card statements to see again that you didn't go on a retreat in India. And then we'll pay you back if it's eligible. So then I was like, oh, I've got to make sure it's all eligible, because otherwise, I'm never going to see this money again. So yeah, I mean, that particular one was 4 or 5 months. I forget specifically, but it depends. It just heavily depends on the grant. Some of them, for example, will give you just a sum upfront, and then you, like you said, you work with someone to see how it's going, or you get it on a monthly basis. There's other ones even where you get a grant to hire, for example, an MBA student.
Oh,
yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, particularly interesting when you're starting a business, or if you just need a little help with something specific. And those you would definitely get monthly. There's also a lot of grants that help you hire someone outside of them being an MBA student. And then the way it would work is they say the budget is 50 grand for a year. We're going to put in 25 and you have to put in the other 25. And then they kind of track how it's going and how you work. So they're all very different. And so that's why I would also advise to just see what works for you. And also to kind of see if you can gauge if it's a certain thing that you can get it or not, because otherwise it's not really worth the effort.
Yeah. And were there any particular things that those organizations look for to approve you as a beneficiary of that? Like, were there any particular like larger themes that you've noticed that majority of those organizations look on the lookout for?
Yeah, so they always usually have a look at your tax year, because sometimes you have to qualify and have made a certain amount in the previous tax year. That's a big thing. Another thing, and this, I feel like this is pretty boilerplate, is they're asking you why you need it, what you would spend it on, what you would do with the money. So yeah, those I would say are the two biggest things.
And did you get a sense of like how many people we're competing with for some of those ones?
Yeah, I mean, no, not really, to be honest. Like some of the ones that I apply for are a fairly small pool, maybe like 100 people. Sometimes it's more, but like the government grant is open to anyone. And that's that specific one that I got. I don't think they frequently say no. So yeah.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, it's I think it's going to spark an idea for many to go like, oh, and I could actually go and have a look and see what's available and realize that it's possible. I mean, you went and applied and got financing. So I've come across other coaches and solopreneurs who've done that as well. So yeah, definitely. For sure, interesting to look into it, to especially to help to get that confidence that, okay, maybe when I'm quitting the corporate job, maybe I'm not really free falling. There's something there that wants to hold me, and I should just open up my mind and look for ways to do that.
Yeah, 100%. One last thing I wanted to add is sometimes they ask you to pay to apply. That's never worth it. That's never, ever, ever worth it. So
good to know. And how about the advisors? Like you could have like advisors, you pay them to help you do the application and stuff like that. Would you recommend that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends the budget that you're on. I am more of a DIY person, so I would always just do it myself and teach myself how to do it. But if you have the budget for that, then I that would be a great help, because I'm sure that they would open other doors as well. So
that coach I have in mind, who got the funding, she's gone to someone like that to help her to put together the application. And I kept thinking, oh, it sounds a bit dodgy. Like you pay someone to help you get access to the funding, but she's got it. And I think what's important if you are considering to finding someone who can help you with that is to ask for their credentials and percentage of successes, and maybe even speak to their past clients and see who's actually got the help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of this. If any other questions, feel free to, for anyone listening, feel free to add them to the comment box. And yeah, also, Celine, I'd love to hear, I mean, I know that, part of your journey has been with us, like joining the Abundant Coach Accelerator to help you actually focus on their client sort of acquisition, lead generation part of it for building your business. For anyone listening who might be thinking, for coaches in particular, oh, could this be something for me? I would just love for you to share, like, what were your biggest insights and recommendations to others?
Yeah. Well, my first recommendation is to always look for help when you feel like you're not going anywhere, like I did by joining your program, because previously I ran a marketing consulting business, and the way you look for clients there is very different than in a coaching business. So I have found it very eye-opening, and it's given me a lot of confidence to know that there is a structure, there is a way to do it that yields results. So that has been a really calming effect on my life.
Yeah, it's been fascinating watching your journey and how it unfolded, and then also just to see you land on the business idea that you feel so passionate about and like on fire. And by the way, for anyone listening, again, if you are in a full-time role and thinking, okay, I don't know, I kind of have this itch to do something next. If you're done working for someone else, you want to be your own boss, please do reach out to Céline for a chat, at least to even like brainstorm ideas and brainstorm financing as well, and how you could or could not make it work. I love, Céline, your very grounded approach, and let's not just, put everything at risk. Let's just be a lot more methodological and thoughtful about how you make the transition. So I really love that about your program. So for anyone there, feel free to reach out. Céline, what's your preferred way of getting in touch with you?
I always say via email, because I find that the DM button on LinkedIn doesn't always work. Yeah, so my email is just hello@thehikingcoach.ca. So anyone, that's the best way.
Hello at thehikingcoach.ca, just to repeat that. And otherwise, you can just also look, people could also look you up on LinkedIn, right? And just send you a message or a connection request.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. Look forward to you following your onwards journey with your coaching business and supporting other inspiring female entrepreneurs to make their dreams come true, to work for themselves. All right.
Well, awesome. Thanks for inviting me for this chat. It was great.
Yeah, thank you. It was really insightful. I'm really grateful for you sharing your journey and your recommendations. Thank you, Céline.
Yeah, of course.